today we have with us the very first DJ that this Jockey magazine interviewed for the cover story, Anish Sood. I know for a fact that ever since you've been on quite the roller coaster when it comes to producing music. Your sound has evolved. Clearly, your studio has evolved quite a bit, and you've been doing quite a lot of good stuff. So we would really love to have like a review of the years so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Firstly, a lot of things have changed.
Yes.
The dance music scene has evolved quite a bit. I think 2014, 15 was kind of really the peak of EDM and the big festivals, and that really, I think, peaked out around 2016, maybe 2017. And then we kind of saw a slight slump in festival numbers and festivals overall. I think that also coincided with the global decline of EDM as a genre and big room house as a genre, which was kind of replaced by the rise of hip hop and trap globally. That urban Spanish, Latin music, all of that made a huge comeback. So I decided consciously somewhere around 2018 to kind of go back to my roots, which were really house and progressive house and techno and deep house. And that's kind of where I started off around the early 2000s. And, before really big room house came as a genre. And over the past 2 years, I've kind of focused towards slowly getting back to that style, whilst trying to also retain my fan base and, helping them slowly evolve, if you can say so, to those genres. I think the main thing for me and really the trigger factor was that I really wasn't enjoying the music I was playing at gigs.
Okay.
And sure, these were obviously large format festivals. These were college shows, arenas with 3, 4, 5, 10,000 capacity venues, right? And
Yes.
it's very hard to play a deeper, more progressive or underground set at these venues. For a lot of people, that is their first exposure to electronic music, especially in colleges. That's the first time they're really listening to or experiencing a dance music concert,
Right.
So it was getting really difficult to play the style that I wanted to play at these shows, and I was feeling that increasingly I don't relate to this music anymore. I think for me it was significantly an easier process because I was going back to something that I already knew really well and something that I enjoyed and really is the core of my being as an artist. So I think it wasn't much of an unlearning to do, as opposed to kind of like a homecoming.
Okay. Ever since 2018,
Yeah.
what is the kind of music that you've been putting out? If we had to compare it to what you were putting out, before you stepped into big room, is there a lot of similarity to that music style, or have you evolved your sound, by using new elements?
Yeah. So, essentially, what the biggest thing you will notice, I mean, over the years, obviously, that is with the case with any producer, is that the sound is definitely more polished.
Right.
I've always tried to stick to a very clean sound. I don't use too many elements. Most of my projects will max out at 40 channels. Some of them are even just 20, 25 channels. And I'm really like a strong believer. I come from the school of thought that, when you listen to a band, you have 5 instruments. That's it. There's 5 channels. There's no concept of 100 channels when you listen to a band. I don't really personally see the need for electronic producers to come in and have 100 channels on a track with crazy stuff going on and 5 layers for every synth. That I think is just an overkill. If you have one great sounding synth, that's all you need to kind of just take up all that space. So over the years, my production has definitely gotten a lot cleaner. But if you listen to my music today, as the stuff that's coming out today, as opposed to 3 years ago or 4 years ago, the musical style is definitely more classic house and techno. Even though some of the elements may be pop facing, but the production is more old school house techno.
Okay.
So it's definitely more stripped down production.
What is the kind of gear that you're using right now to achieve the sound that you're putting out?
I would still say that like 70% of my stuff is in the box. I had like 4 synths at one point, and I sold all 4 of them. I sold my Moog, I sold my Korg, I sold everything.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I just wasn't able to work with them. I actually just have 2 synths right now at this point. One of them is this one. This is the Electron Analog 4. And this is something new that I got. It's the Roland JU6A.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's an emulation of the Juno 60 and the Juno 106.
Right.
But yeah, essentially, I mean, my stuff is very much in the box. Since that I use a lot of the UHE stuff, Repro 1, Repro 5. I use Contact. I use a lot of stuff from this company in LA called Output, and I also use, they have like a sampler library kind of thing called Arcade, which is
Okay.
kind of like Splice, but it's in the DAW like a plugin.
All right.
I use that. But yeah, essentially, coming back to your question, it's especially for bass lines, it's mainly the analog 4. But that's the thing. I would say, like, my process of my workflow is the first half an hour or the first 1 hour is just getting the kick and bass right. If you have the kick in the bass line, everything else you can just sit easily on top of that. So that is kind of where I try and fill up the bulk of soundscapes, is the kick, bass, and then just a couple of synths.
All right. Have you been inspired by any particular artist internationally? Are there a few artists that you follow, and is this quite reminiscent to their kind of production style, or is this something that you have figured out by yourself over the years, that this is what I should be doing and this is how I should be approaching a piece?
I don't try and replicate too many other international artists or too many Indian artists or anyone. If I find something that's getting complex to produce, or something that I'm not enjoying, I will not veer towards that. So in general, yeah, of course, I have figured out that this is the kind of style and music that I like to produce. Which is why I make it, and that's just the easiest way to also define your sound.
Right.
If that's something that comes naturally to you as a producer, then that's what you're good at, and that's what you should stick to doing. But having said that, yeah, there are, a few international artists who always are inspiring me. I think it keeps changing all the time. I would say at this point of time, if I had to pick like 2 or 3 names, I would say. There's this whole crew in Berlin called Kind Music, Rampa, and me, Adam Port. All of them produce a very similar sort of melodic house laced with techno sound, but it's the way they process their samples is very, very unique. Very unique use of delays, filters, reverbs, all combined with each other and creating like chains. In fact, sometimes they'll just take one clap and make a whole beat out of it, just by using delay and reverb on it. But that creates a very organic sound. There's also this Italian disco producer. His name is Musumeci.
Okay.
So Musumeci. Rolling bass lines, very clean production. Again, another one, if I could pick, is this guy who makes Italo disco. His name is Crystal Clear.
Okay.
So that would be kind of like the sound inspiration palette that I'm looking at right now, but it could completely change day after tomorrow when I find someone new. But essentially, yeah, if you just listen to a lot of these producers, or I think if you listen to most good music, right, you'll realize that it actually is very simple. And there's very few elements that are actually taking up the space. What I've noticed, especially with younger producers, is that when they can't get that one element to sound right, they'll try and compensate by adding layers or adding more elements to try and make that up, But that's not always the way it works. If you can actually just focus and learn sound design, I feel like a lot of young producers haven't spent enough time learning sound design. So they will just, keep hunting preset libraries and going from preset to preset, looking to find that sound magically. But you're not going to find that sound in a preset library because that producer has created it from scratch. So you need to figure out how synths work. You need to, you can take a preset as a starting point. That's always great. Even I use presets as a starting point, to as close as you want to. You don't have to synthesize everything from scratch. But beyond that, you have to push a little bit within the sonic capabilities of the synth to find that sound. And that is kind of when you will find and be able to create that one really fat bass line, or that one lead, or that one pad, which is, totally dominating the track, and that becomes the focus of your track.
My next question veers towards your, the several collaborations that you've had with artists from abroad, artists from here. Do you maintain the same approach to production at that point in time while collaborating with these different artists, or does your style also kind of, evolve or adjust?
I have been going to LA every year for a month to write music. I have a huge bunch of friends there who are all songwriters. That is essentially is where most of my vocal tracks have come from. And in those writing sessions, the process is a little different. Especially when I'm working with a vocalist, I really like to produce the track around the vocal. If you're bringing a vocalist on, then you should make your vocalist the forefront of the track. Otherwise, you don't need to have the vocalist. You can just have backing vocals. Don't try and put synths that, crowd and take away from the lead vocal. Maybe when the vocal's not there on the drop or something like that, you can play around with it. But essentially, your vocal, while the vocal is your vocalist is singing the vocal, he or she needs to be the forefront, and your track needs to be built around that. So my process to work with these vocalists is I start with really rough demos. They could just be even just a 4-chord piano loop with a very basic beat behind it. Sometimes it's a co-writing session where we're both writing the vocals together. So then it's just jamming out on the piano or jamming on the guitar, and figuring out writing as we go. So there really isn't a fixed approach, but the production work only starts after the vocal is ready. And then once the track is produced, then the final vocal is resung on the produced track.
Has there been a massive change in the way that people consume electronic music internationally versus India?
Obviously speaking, up until this pandemic hit, to say late last year, early this year, I saw a huge rise back to club culture, which is great. I think, from the time frame of 2012 or 13 to maybe say 2016 or 17, clubs had taken a bit of a backseat, and everyone was just trying to put on outdoor festivals, and there was just outdoor events happening everywhere and anywhere, right, at all sides of capacities. So I think with the rise of, with underground music also blowing up in India, house and techno making a big comeback, club culture really came back. So there were a lot of club gigs happening. Some really good clubs also opened in the recent past. Great venues, especially venues like Prism in Hyderabad, Antisocial in Bombay, the new one. Really cool, well kitted out clubs, great sound light systems. So that I saw is a big push. Internationally, to be very honest with you, I haven't seen too much of a change. Music festivals have been pretty much the same. Production standards have kept going up. Capacities have kept going up. Same with clubs. Clubs have been getting bigger. In that sense, electronic music really globally is at its peak of consumption.
You've clearly been one of the earliest DJs to be vocal about the need for clubs to have good sound systems, good lighting. So with respect to that, in your personal experience, have you witnessed that kind of a more hands-on approach by DJs or from the DJ's end when it comes to designing the soundscape and the lighting and stuff like that in clubs?
So to be very honest with you, and to answer that question very frankly, I think there may be just 3 or 4 or maybe 5 clubs at the most that are venues that are designed essentially with electronic or music in mind. Most of the clubs that you so-called clubs that you call them are actually bars or restaurants disguising themselves as clubs. In that sense, you can't really do much because they are also trying to serve a dual purpose. So sure, they have some lighting here and they have some sound here. When they do have a bigger artist, they rent in sound or light. So at that point, sometimes obviously we have a rider that we send out with certain specs. So then we ensure that the rider is followed. So you then know that there's basic level of sound and light available. But yes, as far as if you speak about the venues that are designed with live performances in mind, again, bringing the two examples that I would use in the recent past are Antisocial and Prism. You can clearly see that they've taken, care of production standards and levels that you need as an artist to come in and perform. And when you go in there, they very often, both these venues have everything that you need. It just really comes from a point of what the venue is actually designed for, and what purpose it's solving.
At the current moment, as you said, everything's reset to zero. And nightclubs are having quite a bit of a challenge ahead of them, to restart. I know for a fact that you are a part of this this collective called the Indian Nightlife Collective, which looks to work for the benefit of nightlife workers and employees and stuff like that. So, for those who don't know about it, could you please, explain that in detail?
My partner Arnav, who is works very closely with Kirisu and is also a partner at the Digital Festival in India. The both of us decided to get together and start this collective. It's a non-government NGO, non-governmental organization, and the idea primarily stemmed because we were doing a campaign with Budweiser called for Mix Mag, called BudX Home, and they wanted to stream 14 DJs from their homes, and they wanted to make a donation of $2,000, which is about 1.5 lakhs per stream, to a charitable organization. So initially, when we were having some conversations, we looked around and they said that maybe we should just donate to the PM's fund or something like that. And we said that that money technically really isn't going to come back to our industry for sure. There's really no one is looking out for our industry. So we looked around and we couldn't find a fund or an organization that catered specifically to nightlife industry workers. So we decided to set one up. Now it's been a month since we set this up, because this happened mid-April. But the process of registering this fund and setting up the trust in the bank account has just been the toughest, because Bombay was completely locked down. He's based in Bombay. We have lawyers who are waiting with the papers. But I think once we get this money from Budweiser, which they've contributed, which is 21 lakhs to begin with, we will then start accepting applications for people who might need grants or aid. So essentially, to sum things up, the way this is going to function, at least the COVID fund, is that we are looking to support financially, and this is direct financial assistance. It's basically straight away money in your account for people who are affected. Who essentially we're looking out for people who are also part of the gig economy, so they're freelancers. We're not really looking out to support people who have jobs. If, for example, if you work with a nightclub and as a full-time position and you're still getting paid, then that's not someone who we would prioritize, versus say a sound engineer or a light engineer who also depends on every gig for work, or a bouncer maybe, or a photographer. So these are also, musicians are not the only people who are gig workers. In fact, we feel that artists and musicians will still be better placed off. They will still have savings. A lot of people at the lower end of the spectrum who are also freelance workers. These could be people who are working with sound vendors, with light vendors, who are relying on outdoor shows or production shows or production events for their work.
Right.
It would be, like I said, security staff. So anybody who is associated with the nightlife industry, who has lost their primary source of income, which was gigs, and is in emergency need of financial assistance. So this assistance primarily is looking to cover any emergency medical bills, emergency utility bills, rent, food, so that kind of stuff. We have a panel of about six experts who all come from different fields in the industry, and we've kind of covered and touched upon, somebody from the live event space, someone from the production services, someone who's covering brands. And then when all of these applications come in, we'll have an application window. Then these applications will be democratically voted upon. And then we decide how much aid and how we go about this.
So is there a particular, aid slab that you're looking at per person?
That is something we haven't decided yet, because to be honest, we don't know how many applications are going to come in. I think the slabs on aid and how many people we can reach out to, we will have to look at once we go through the applications, and also kind of weed out the genuine applications from the not so genuine applications, and then come up with a figure that actually helps these people, as opposed to being a token amount which doesn't do anything. I think the funda should really be to substantially help a mid-sized number of people, as opposed to just reach out to everyone and give them an insignificant amount. Because I mean, the idea here is not just to gain goodwill. I mean, the idea is not really to gain goodwill, but actually to help these people.
Right.
And then what happens is that Budweiser is the first brand we're working in. Once we have, say, the people who we're not able to help, then we can always go to other brands and raise more aid, saying that, here, listen, we have a lot of genuine cases here.
Right.
This is a great time from your CSR spends or from your charity spends to take out some money and contribute to the cause.
Right.
And one good thing is that the government has made all COVID fund donations this year CSR compatible.
Compliant. Right.
Yeah, compliant. So anybody who wants to donate, they get 100% tax exemption anyway through CSR.
Right.
So again, we will also start talking to other brands and start talking to other partners who we can raise money from once we have just the legal backend set up.
What kind of support would you like to have from the industry folk in helping this grow or reach more people?
First things first, I mean, as soon as we launch and we set up this aid form, the first thing we need that everybody, or rather we hope everyone will do, is just circulate this link as widely and far wide as possible. What we're trying to do is we're trying to work with larger organizations who employ a lot of staff and have circulate this internally, so that we can try and reach maximum number of people, because it's we want everyone to apply. Obviously, we'll have to set our criteria and pick out the most deserving or the most financially affected cases. Those will be given priority to. But as far as an industry is concerned, yes, we just want to get the word out. Once we start putting this process together and helping people, I feel like right now we are focusing as an emergency fund, and then the secondary goals of the collective are then to eventually get into skill development, do workshops, also then become a face for the industry to open up conversation and dialogue with the government. There's really no one talking to the government right now about what it is for the nightlife industry, because there isn't really anybody who represents it. So we don't really want to, or we don't claim to be an all representative body of the nightlife industry. And if you don't feel like what we're doing is correct, you don't have to identify with us. But we would like to start somewhere. But again, that is secondary. So primarily the idea is to get money in the hands of these people, because unfortunately nothing that the government has announced in the recent packages is actually going to put money in anybody's hands directly. And also, unfortunately, seems like things in our industry are going to be the slowest to restart, especially with live events and social distancing norms and curbings and all of that. So even when events do resume for the next few months at least, I don't expect them to go back to the capacities that they will go back to.
Yes.
Hopefully by the end of this year and next year, things will normalize. If we can manage to find a vaccine, or if people, just get over the fear of this and build their immunity. But until then, we do need something to support the people in our industry who are impacted by this. And that is what we're trying to bridge over the next 3 to 6 months.
How do you, as an artist, look at reaching more or reaching your audience, your fans, from A, the artist perspective, and from B, now, since you are a key member of the Indian Nightlife Collective, is there going to be a platform where new or emerging artists or something like that, they can come together and showcase their skills and reach a larger audience?
Yeah. So to divide your answer into two parts, well, the first part I would say is that it's now more important than ever to be engaged with your fan base. Whether you want to use social media to just share your life, or you want to put out live streams, or you want to put out free music as a free download or as a remix or edit. It's a great time to just create content and put it out there. You have to understand, however, that you are now competing with a Netflix or an Amazon Prime or a Hotstar for space and time in the content, because it's not the same that when you're sitting at home, you can either choose to watch Netflix or you can choose to listen to music. When you're commuting to work and driving, you can't listen to Netflix, you can't watch Netflix. So we actually did, the industry overall did see a decline in streaming numbers when this started, because two really large sources of streams, which were commutes and gyms, both shut down. So suddenly you had a lot of people who had free time, but they had a lot more options they could do with their free time. So, but don't let that discourage you. It's also a great time to capture people's audience attention. We were recently having a chat with the head of artist relations at Spotify India, and he was saying, that especially for the Indian independent artists, it's a great time to put out music because there's no movies coming out, and there aren't going to be any movies coming out for the next 6 months at least. Because whatever movies were in the pipeline, also production has been halted, which means there's no new film music coming out. They're not going to release a soundtrack to a movie if the movie can't come out. So that just creates so much space with all that movie music and the Bollywood and Tollywood and all of that, which is taking up the front of the catalog on all your streaming services. That space is all completely empty now. For independent artists or for anybody who can really take it. If you have a great song, and you can pitch it to the services in the right way, you can be on the front and cover of the streaming services page when you open. It's a great time to grow your fan base, to cross over into fan bases that may not have known your music earlier. It's a great time to start learning new skills, whether it's in your career or whether you want to even learn a third skill, whether it's learning a language or learning something else to do. It's also a great wake-up call for a lot of artists to review their finances and review their goals on a large, like a 5-year, 10-year plan, and start making a contingency plan. I know I have. If things don't resume and don't pick up to the way they were, a lot of people may need to get a day job. So it's something that you might have to plan for, and you should plan for. And if you do want to get a day job, is there a new skill that you can learn, whether it's coding or, web design or graphic design or whatever it is that something you want to take a short course in and get yourself acquainted with, so that, 6 months down the line, if you do need a secondary freelance job to support yourself, at least you have an option open. As coming to the second part of your question, which is, are we looking to create a platform for emerging talent and artists? That is something I'm doing with my record label, which is Class Action.
Okay.
So we've been putting out music from young indie producers. We've had 2 releases so far. One from a Bangalore-based producer called Stalwart, and the second one was just 3 weeks ago from a really good melodic house techno artist from Bombay. His name is Sixth Ocean. Yeah, both tracks did really well. Stalwart's track was supported on by a bunch of international DJs. Sixth Ocean actually had his track added as the top song on one of the biggest Spotify electronic playlists globally, and he also got featured on the cover. So that was a huge achievement for him.
Lovely.
Yeah, his track also got played by this trance legend Ferry Costin. So he played it in his radio show. So that was cool. It's nice to see that like emerging young talent from India is getting international global support. So that's something we're doing with the label, and we're trying to provide them with label services and marketing services that we use typically for my music. So we leverage all the relationships that I have with distributors, with streaming services, with brands, with marketing platforms, and we provide all of those services to artists that we sign.
What kind of process of elimination do you as a label look at when you have so many entries coming into you, to be featured or to be signed up with your label?
Well, there's 2 things. The best way to reach out to us is to just DM us on Instagram. You can find Class Action on Instagram and reach out via DM, send us a private SoundCloud link, and we'll make sure somebody from the label hears it, and then eventually it'll come to me. But as far as your question goes, Class Action as a label, we've decided to sign music which definitely has a distinctive hook element to it. It doesn't need to be a vocal. It can be a very strong synth. It can be a very strong groove, or a bass line. But if you listen to our previous 2 releases, you will instantly be able to tell what the hook element is in the song, right? And I think for me, that essentially is very important if you want a song to do well and be successful. As far as genres go, we are operating in the house techno space primarily. Not very dark music, nor very commercial, but somewhere between disco and on the melodic side, you could say maybe Anjuna Deep, in that space, and just easy going 120 to 125 BPM. That's really where the space is. Kind of reflective of my music style, but we're a little more experimental.
Coming back to your music, do you have any plans? How much of time would you be devoting to your music, and what kind of music are you looking at putting out, in the next coming few months?
As far as my music is concerned, I put out 2 singles this year. One of them was called Running Back to You with Lisa Mishra. One of them is called Say My Name with Charlie Sputnik from LA. That was in Feb and April. And then I have released 2 remixes for the 2 EPs on our label Class Action, which was one for Sixth Ocean, one for Stalwart.
Okay.
Coming up next is actually a remix for Ritviz, his new single Thandi Hawa.
All right.
Yeah, and then in the first week of June, I did a remix for an indie singer-songwriter. Her name is Mali. She released a new single called Age of Limbo, which is like a dark pop indie record, and I really like the vocal and the melody and the hook on it. So I decided to to remix it, and then we released the remix on my label. And then after that, in the middle of June, we have another release from the label. There's a new artist we've signed from Pune. His name is Jahan Shah. So that comes out in the middle of the 3rd week of June, and I have a remix on that as well. So yeah, it is a pretty packed schedule. So yeah, I think over the next 3 to 4 months, there will definitely be about 8 to 10 tracks, including singles and remixes. Yeah.
Has there been any particular standout software or plugin or anything that you've discovered, hardware or software in this in the span of time, and something that has kind of impacted the way that you work or your workflow, or anything of that sort?
In the recent past, nothing really comes to mind. I have also decided not to spend too much money buying new random things, which becomes a very, very bad habit, I think, which we all have.
Right.
I've been not really looking around for things to see what's new, because when you know something exists, then you want it.
Right.
But I would say maybe a year and a half ago, by far the most significant piece of software rather, that I've come across is SonarWorks. And that really, really, I moved into this house about a year and a half ago. So when I set the studio up, there is a significant amount of treatment that we've done. And it is a fully custom built room by Ultra Acoustics from Bombay. They did a great job, and they really controlled most of the issues in the room. But that last 25% came from SonarWorks, and that makes a huge difference. So even if you're a bedroom producer and you don't have too much acoustic correction available, SonarWorks will definitely help you clean up your mixes a lot.
Any particular piece of hardware that you would recommend?
I think there's a lot of phenomenal stuff that Behringer has been putting out. They have a whole series of synths that they've basically just cloned the whole world. Yeah. And that they've put all of that out. But that is something I would recommend, to find a synth that you like in that portfolio. But I also know a lot of my friends are raving about the new Omnisphere. And the new Omnisphere update, which allows you now to control your hardware synths directly. But even if you don't have the hardware synths, you can still use the emulations. And I think at this point, maybe the smart thing to do would be to invest that money into Omnisphere than to pick up hardware synths. I also don't know how easy availability is going to be now with all the shipping regulations. So maybe I would recommend, if they are looking to buy some new software, get the Omnisphere, which actually has the hardware emulations are supposed to be phenomenally accurate. So it's as good as getting a piece of hardware.
In closing, would you like to share anything with the industry at large?
I think the only thing I would say is that we're really all in this together, and I think we have to figure out systems and processes to support each other. I think going back when things do reopen, with venues, especially in live events, I think we will all need to move to a model which is more sustainable for everyone involved. Also, I would really like to, at this point, petition especially venues and promoters to focus on Indian talent. I don't really see the reason why we need to keep importing international talent into India every weekend, especially some of the smaller acts. I'm all for for spreading art and spreading music and culture and all of that. But I think it became towards the end of things, like late last year. It was just a race as to who could book another white name, and I think right now in India, especially in the Indian scene, we have enough talent in almost every genre of music that we want, and you have really good acts, people that are talented, and a lot of these acts, they just don't get the space that they need to perform because the venues have somebody international booked, and even audiences, they'll just flock to go and look at a new international act when you can have the same experience or sometimes even a better experience with an Indian act. So I think we really need to support our scene and look out for our scene over the next few months to build it back to where it was. Because at this point, if venues and promoters don't support Indian artists, they are not going to be able to financially make the numbers work.
I think that's a lovely note that we can end this interview on. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, man.
And my pleasure. And I hope we can interact once again sometime soon and hear some more developments,
Yeah.
positive developments. When it comes to the Indian Nightlife Collective, and when it comes to class action as well.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
Yes. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Anish.